Hi, this is Michael Joy. Welcome back to Absolute Joy. This is a long, short story. I'm going to put a couple timelines together just to give you the flavor of Arizona and the exploring that we were grown up into. My parents weren't really active together with us much, but there were times that we went on adventures. And my dad had a Series II Land Rover. He brought that, he was the original owner, and the Land Rover is like the Marlin Perkins safari vehicle. If you don't know what a Series II Land Rover is, it's an aluminum Jeep with a 4-cylinder engine and like 18 gears. You're supposed to be able to climb like a billy goat. You know, this was great. Now, my dad didn't drive it very often because he was always working, but they would buy these pirated books about ghost towns in Arizona. Pirated books means they weren't printed properly. Like somebody printed them at a store and then they sold them as books because they discover these towns. This is before drones, this is before Google Earth and all this stuff. And so we would set our sights on a ghost town, and then we'd take the Jeep and we'd drive out to the ghost town. No air conditioning, we were hot, you know, you have some sandwiches in the back there. I don't even think my dad had a gun. We'd be looking at the book, he's like, well, the road stops here, you know? It was like, but the town is up there. So we'd have to kind of go through the desert and find our way through this. Sometimes it was pretty easy. But I remember we got to this one ghost town this one time, and there was one guy that lived in that ghost town. He was not used to seeing people. That's because of the Land Rover, right? Nobody else in Arizona had Land Rovers. They had these big trucks jacked up and all this stuff, and you needed a little car to get into these little squirrely places. And I think the guys with the big trucks didn't even care about the ghost towns. You know, one of the big things is when you're four-wheeling in those days in Arizona is you could be, mine shaft, and you could just be lost right in the hole. You go right down an event. Mines were a real serious things. You hear about snakes and scorpions, but mines were a big deal. Some of them on the mountainside you can see because they would have what they call the outcroppings, or I don't know, it was where they dig the dirt and they put a pile outside the mine. We used to call those calling cards because that told us exactly where the mines were. But this old man at the ghost town, we didn't stay long because he was like, had that eye that did that thing and talking about snakes too soon. And I don't know, it was not good. But they had this mine in the middle of town. At least that's how I remember it. They had a bunch of old wood shacks and stuff like this. It was like a proper movie set. Because we were a family, we were not threatening, but he had the shotgun and you listened closely to those guys, right? Clearly we were like entertaining for him. And my dad's like, oh, my kids just want to see a mine. And he's like, oh, I got something to show you. Legit. He took us over to this mine. I could have gone down the ladder into this. And I'm like leaning over like, wow, my dad's like, no. He's like, there is no rescue out here. No cell phones. You know, I don't even think my dad's pager worked out there. So that was a successful adventure. So they used to take us rock hunting for Apache tears, obsidian, things like this. And, you know, in Arizona, you learn the tricks. You learn, you before you pick over a stone, you kick it because you don't want to pick up a stone and have a scorpion there. And my dad ended up getting bit by a snake later in life, and that was not good. I grew up with this adventure desert thing. We'd go to find Indian ruins, and some people were vandalizing them, like extracting artifacts. It wasn't great. Later in life, we had out by Cave Creek, we took my stepfather's truck. He had an old 50-something Chevy truck with a stick shift and a metal dashboard and this splintery bed in the back. And we used to drive this off into the mountains. And what we didn't know is they were mining back there. Big mines, like the Caterpillar truck type of stuff. And we had entered someone's area and he came out, and the miners are quirky. They don't want you to know what's going on. Again, they saw us as a family, and he's like, oh, we're going to Black Mountain, so-and-so over there. And he's like, oh, just cut through my property. This guy was on something. He opened the gate and then he ran to catch up after he closed the gate, and he jumped on the back of our truck to take us to tell us where to drive. His arm was gone. I mean, it was like raw. He had something, it was like one step away from maggots. I'm like, what happened to your arm? He's like, oh, I had my truck jacked up and it fell. Pinched my arm. Took a bite out of it. Took a bite out of it. I'm like, this guy. So he was on something. We used to go off into these Indian ruins and we'd look for arrowheads and stuff like this. Sometimes I wanted to go exploring and the rest of the family didn't want to go. And so I had an ATC, and we were out in Cave Creek, Arizona. And that ATC is the 3-wheeler. It was still, I had another version too, a 185S with a furry seat that I reupholstered with teddy bear fur. It was comfy. I would just tell my mom, again, before cell phones, I'm like, I'm going west, not further than 3 miles. I'm not back by sundown. It was fun. It's like a movie. Got some sandwiches. And what I would do is I would go and I would drive up to the mines. So I would go up around and park, go up these trails and stuff like this. And then I'd get off my ATC and I felt like in Indiana. It was so fantastic. I'd walk the ridges of the mountains and had that wind and I could feel it, and it was nice, cool, and you see all these beautiful saguaro cactuses that they grow like 1 foot every 30 years or something, and it was fantastic. It was like so romantic. And I'm walking along the ridgeline of this one mountain. They're not super tall. And I come over this rocky thing right at the top of the mountain. There's a mine shaft. That was very unusual. And I'm like, Lost Dutchman mine. We have what's called the Superstition Mountains in Arizona. And there is a story about these train robbers or whatever, and they hid bags of gold in the Lost Dutchman mine. And so I thought, this makes sense. You can't see it from the ground. No outcropping. You can't see it from the air because the trees are covering it and this, that. And I'm like, I'm checking out this mine, right? And I go up to the edge of it, and there's an extension cord going down into it. Now, the extension cord was clearly not to be plugged into anything. It was tied around a tree, and someone used it as a rope to go down into this mine. And I'm like, tug on the cord. I'm like, oh, it's tied around the tree. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going in the mine. But I tied it around me, and I'm like, because I wanted to look in the mine. It was in good shape. There was still the ladders down there. The thing is the cord was still going down. And I'm like, I don't think you can climb up an extension cord. How do you climb an extension cord 30 feet? Do you know the extension cords are about like this, and they're slick plastic? I don't even know. So I was just like, I don't hear anything. I'm gone. I went down the mountain and I thought, I'll come back, I'll get some rope, and I'll do this properly. I came down and I walked around, and there was another mine that sort of had been visited many times, and it had a big plateau before the outcropping of the rocks. And I didn't explore it. And we had Christmas. I said, my brother was in town, my sister, and I'm like, come on, I'll drive you on the ATC one at a time. And my mom on the back of the ATC was hilarious. She's like, what the? And so anyways, I'm driving them back into the desert. I drop them off. I go get another person, drop them off. And then I'm like, I told you it was a really nice mine. And this one went straight back. We're all kind of walking straight back into this mountain. And then there's this weird den. Walking in, it was okay. And then it got kind of rocky. And then there was this muddy, watery thing with some wood going across it. And it was kind of stinky, stagnant dirt. And then past that, there was this, what we used to call a pack rat nest made of cholla cactus. But it was all bloody and stuff. So I thought, oh, maybe a bobcat made a den in there or something like this. Anyways, it was very uneventful. We walked back to the mine, and I was like, aw, because we all did it at the same time. And then we came back. So that's the end of that story. Until a couple months later, I talked to a friend of mine. He was like my Uncle Dave. And I said, yeah, we were talking about mines. And I said, I went to the one at the top of the hill, and then below it was another mine that we went into, but it just dead ended. And he goes, was there any muddy water in it? I said, yeah, towards the back. He goes, oh, that's where it went straight down. We all walked across the mouth of the mine that had been covered up by this pack rat's nest and collected dirt and condensation water and stuff like that. And someone had put some boards across it who knew what it was, but we didn't know how old the boards were. So it was kind of like, what the hell? But I used to go out to those mines and look for turquoise because they would kick out. They were looking for gold, and if a quartz was around, there was gold. And otherwise, they were turquoise mines. I used to spend hours looking for turquoise, but in fact, I could just go to the store and buy a little turquoise piece. So we were always exploring, and there were some crazy people in those desert things. The moral of the story is nowadays it's much easier to explore because you have a cell phone and GPS. In the days that we did it, you needed to leave a note because no bueno, snaky. We were on a hill one time. My dad was going up this hill, and it kept getting steeper and steeper and steeper, and this was a Land Rover. And the front of the Jeep started to lift. And so when he applied the brakes, there's no front brakes to apply. So anytime he touched the brakes, it lifted the Jeep even more. So he would let it settle down, and he's like, kids, get out. And I was like, oh. And then we thought, okay, he's going to take it down. He goes, no, go sit on the hood. So we're on the front of the car trying to keep it. He's like, it's very intense. I don't know if he was worried about us, but he loved that Jeep. Yeah, we got down, and this was so precarious that at the bottom of the hill, there were like other people watching because you could see us from the highway, and people were stopped, and they saw this Jeep kind of backing down the hill like this. And we were all shook up. We got to the bottom. He was like, well, okay, I gotta work tomorrow, so let's go home. He didn't drive that Jeep for months. It was crazy. And that Series II has been in storage. I don't even think it has 20,000 miles on it. It's like a precious vehicle. He has adored that car. He has rebuilt that car. And now I think my brother, and now that my father's ill, I think my brother's gonna buy that. It just sat. It was like an artifact that moved from every house as a childhood that we lived in. There would be the Land Rover parked in front. He just liked talking to people about it. Never drove it. It was terribly uncomfortable to drive. There was you would have the seat, and then the back of the seat kind of hit you in the back here. So man, if you ever had whiplash, you were getting it. And then in the middle, there was like this little compartment, and then there was the other seat. The thing is you could open this compartment and you just see right to the ground. I'm like, oh, it's got a toilet. I'm not kidding. It was great. I asked somebody about the Series II, and they're very popular, right, in Africa. Aluminum, they don't rust. And why a 4-cylinder, not a bigger one? They're like, well, gas mileage. The 4-cylinders got really good mileage, and so they had all the gears for crawling up and down things, and you could get, it had 3 gear shifters, one for the 1, 2, 3, and then it had a yellow knob and a red knob. I don't know what those did. The seatbelts weren't really something. He had better seatbelts put into it. The windshield would fold down, and then, I don't know. It was great. I love Land Rovers.